We're live. Yep, we're live. Evening all. Welcome again. Tonight, this is obviously a trigger warning video because of the topic. We are discussing about what to do when you feel like you are trapped with a narcissist. Now, obviously, I've got 4 brilliant legends on that know quite a bit about that. So we're going to start with, how are you, Nick?
Yes, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm well. Had a good week.
That's good. That's good.
So yes, all good.
Absolutely. And we've also got Stuart Wood. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm just going to repeat to you, Stuart, because obviously this is your first time. I'm going to repeat what Christine said. Why don't you give a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, I'll try not to scare people off. My background is that I'm a neuroscientist, so I've spent a lot of time researching into, apart from impacts of the brain, I've spent a lot of time in clinical research, working on clinical trials. My current job, if you like, has been for the past 10 years or so, helping people get over fears using all kinds of interesting animals like snakes and spiders. So it's very much helping people confront fears and learn how to not only recognize them, but get over them. And then what's really brought me here tonight is that I have a passion to see people really understand the true impacts of narcissism, which came really through a 5-year stint that I've had with a friend, supporting them out of a long 17-year marriage to a covert narcissist, and everything that entailed, and everything that it kind of just the life that it spits out of her, the side that other people don't see. So I kind of wanted to bring that to hopefully, bring some of the unseen world into the scene tonight.
Absolutely. And we've got Richard Kaufman. Hello.
Hey. Hopefully everybody's having a great day. This is going to be an amazing topic.
Yeah, you're not driving, are you?
No. My bride is driving, thank God.
That's good. Eyes on the road, Richard. We've also got Christine. Hello.
That's me. Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I am.
Good.
And obviously, speaking of brides, mine's in the comment. How are you, Kerry? Obviously, I can't see your comment at the minute because it's got something over it. Don't know why. Saying share your referral link. I don't know what that means. I don't know. But anyway.
She said hi.
She said hi. Thank you.
To all of us. Well, I think maybe, not to you, but she's saying hi to us.
Maybe not to me. I don't know.
I'm kidding.
but yeah, it's narcissism. I think what we should do to kickstart this, well, first of all, everybody needs to subscribe and share this. That's what I believe everybody needs to do. Because this topic is very, very sensitive. And I think when it comes to narcissism, do we start by actually describing a narcissism in general? Because people do throw that around a lot. And do you guys believe people misconcept it a little bit or overuse it?
Oh, can I go first, please?
Go on. Ladies first.
Okay. So, Adam, and I think you know this. So, narcissism is a form of abuse. And the only person, and I've said this several times, the only people that can actually diagnose narcissism is a qualified healthcare professional. And I cannot stress that enough. And Stuart, I hope you chime in on that as well. Thank you. What I see happening is because we're now recognizing and talking about narcissism and our mental health and abuse, bringing this to light, it's become too easy for people out there to say, oh, throwing out the word narcissist.
You froze then.
We started.
You
Okay.
froze.
We started. Okay. Am I still frozen?
No,
Am I here?
No. You're back. You're back.
Okay. So we started throwing out that word narcissist, narcissism, narcissistic, that whole word as a label, as a name calling, instead of what it truly is. Okay. Narcissism is a form of abuse, plain and simple. It is. The different forms that it takes, and I hope Stuart, he had made reference to a coercive narcissist. There's, I think, 4 or 5, and Stuart can add on this, but there are different forms of narcissism. But we, as laymen out here, are not qualified to label someone or diagnose someone as a narcissist.
What, I'll jump in. Christine, what do you think of is there like characteristics of a narcissist? Or, is there certain,
Absolutely. I lived with it. I lived with a man that was right. Absolutely, he was a narcissist. Now, can I diagnose him? No. Can I diagnose the fact that he was also a psychopath? No. Because I'm not qualified to. But can I do my research and go, oh yeah, check. He checked every single box. Every single box of being a psychopathic, narcissistic SOB. There are characteristics there, absolutely. And I bet you Stuart can definitely tell those characteristics more than we can. I lived with it. I know what I lived with. And because there are different types of narcissism,
there's
going to have...
There's 8. Really?
Okay. So you're going to have different... So what made what I experienced as being in a narcissistic relationship, the next person may not, because it may be completely different because of those characteristics, because of those different types of narcissism.
Because I guess, it's like most things, there's levels at which people will exhibit the degree to which they display the symptoms of being, and I guess it's a lot of people have heard the word but interpret it differently. I think because from my own experience, I had someone I met someone who had narcissistic qualities, and it impacted on people around him, and he, from what I saw of it, he was very self-centered and very sort of selfish, very only about his feelings, what he wanted, but to the degree that it would obviously upset or hurt people around him, because it only mattered what he got. But I guess that could be quite a mild thing compared to some of the levels you talk about. I've been guessing, building on that, so I jump in, Adam. Stuart, do you have anything to add about?
Yeah, I think the way I approach this is there are 2 levels. I appreciate Christine's thing about not being, we're not there to diagnose people, but I think you can strip away that as being relevant or irrelevant, because the impact is nothing to do with diagnosing people. The impact, the actual subject is around what effect do those people have on others, and therefore you don't need to diagnose someone to recognize them as a narcissist or to recognize the traits that they express as narcissistic. And whether or not they fulfill the diagnosis of a narcissist, if they're being toxic, then the issue is how do we approach those people in a way that we can resolve the problems that they're causing. Now, some people can be toxic simply because they're in an environment that has been toxic, that's around them. It's a work environment, for example. Everyone undercuts everybody else. It's just not a nice place to be. But you point that out to them and they say, oh, sorry, I hadn't realized that, because it's very easy. We have all of this kind of unhealthy behavior in the background to slip into it without realizing it. The accepted norm is at that level where being rude to someone is okay, when in fact the reality, the baseline is that being rude to other people is not okay. And so with some people, you can say, do you know what, you were really rude there, and I think actually you need to apologize to that person because it disrupted the whole meeting and it stopped progress. And you can be that blunt with them, and they will say, I'm really sorry, I hadn't realized that. And they will go that step to correct what's happened. The problem with narcissists is that they have no perception or no ability to self-analyze or to understand the concept of empathy. And therefore, two hoots about their impact on other people. So if you were to approach a narcissist with exactly that same thing, you've been rude there, you deserve to apologize, you are opening up a hellhole for basically all those most extreme traits in a narcissist to suddenly break out, because essentially a narcissist is a 7-year-old, or a very young toddler stroke child trapped in an adult body. Emotionally, they develop much beyond being young children, and therefore just as young children will throw a tantrum if they don't get their own way, if you say something that slights a narcissist, they will erupt into a rage, and then you have a child tantrum with adult consequences, really. And it's very interesting talking about types of narcissist. I think detailing people into specific types is very dangerous, because narcissists react differently upon how things are going for them. So if a narcissist is feeling really as though they're on top of life, they're more likely to be that kind of grandiose, outgoing person who's larger than life, who's charismatic, who is happy to make a big impact on the scene. But as soon as life turns against them and things really start to fall apart for them, it's very likely they will shift into another form, which you can call it covert if you like, but it's a less obvious form of narcissism. It's a form of narcissism where they feel very insecure, they feel very easily slighted, and they will take on really toxic traits to undermine and destroy other people, not necessarily obviously, but very often using the friends and the circle of the people that they want to attack. They kind of suddenly from nowhere seem to amass troops and just destroy people without any kind of empathy. But what I did want to say was, just to clarify it, if you want a good idea of narcissism, it's easy to read it because then I get it right. But Diagnosis of Narcissism uses criteria described in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM. And it's actually edition 5 that is the most current. Positive diagnosis requires demonstration of at least 5 of the following traits in a way that causes significant interference with love or work over an extended period of time. So these aren't one-offs, these aren't bad days, this is a consistent pattern. And these include grandiosity and self-importance, persistent fantasies of success, power, attractiveness, intellectual superiority or ideal love, a sense of being superior or special, a wish to be admired, a strong sense of entitlement, they manipulate and exploit others, they lack empathy, they believe others are envious of them, but actually they're envious of other people, and they're arrogant and contemptuous in their attitudes and behaviors. So if you were going for a formal diagnosis for someone with NPD, not narcissistic personality disorder, they would have to have at least 5 of those 9 criteria or demonstrate them consistently over a long period of time for them to have that diagnosis. But we know as individuals, and many people listening will know, that when someone is toxic, they don't necessarily display all those characteristics. They display very strong narcissistic traits that then become destructive on relationships, on cooperation, everything that forms a healthy relationship, the communication, the relationship, and the trust fall apart, and they're replaced with everything happening quickly and lots of excess, people feeling indebted to the person who's in charge. You then have once the narcissist has hooked you in with that, they'll then undermine everything that they liked about you. So suddenly you're left in confusion, and then they go around eventually to discarding you. But quite often that cycle of love bombing, or building up and praising and almost worshipping the ground you feet, the ground that you walk on, and then completely undermining you for exactly those same reasons. That's one of their main modes of attack, because what it does is that kind of elevation of feeling good and then suddenly pulling it away and being horrible. They will change how that happens and when that happens. So it's a bit like going into an arcade and playing on a slot machine. You might get a win, but for the next however many cycles, the chances are you're not going to get a win, because the idea is you will lose out. The slot machines are there to make money, not to give you big payouts. But then it'll give you a little payout, so it keeps you hooked in. And narcissists are exactly the same with their emotional input into relationships. They keep people hooked in because they give them a taste of something that the person wants. Very often the person who is on the receiving end of the narcissism has been analysed. They've had lots of questions bombarded at them, really, by the narcissist, because the narcissist wants to know their strengths, their weaknesses, what they love in life, what they hate. And then all the narcissist does is reflect that back to the person, and it presents this sort of mirage that the person sat in front of them, i.e. the victim, the narcissist that sat in front of you, is the ideal match, because they say what you want to hear. They do the things that you love. They happen to like the things that you like. And so you feel really good. And then suddenly they whip all of that away from you. And suddenly you're left confused. And before you know it, you're back up to feeling good. And then they whip it again away. And then you might have it whipped away for a lot longer. But then sometime they'll give you another glimpse. And that is what they call intermittent reinforcement, which is actually the same pattern of any kind of addiction. So if you have, whether you're if you do the brain activity of someone addicted to technology, to crack cocaine, to relationship, that sort of, abusive dependency on other people.
Well, yeah, Stuart, I was just about to say, and obviously I do want to hear from Richard as well. And what I'm about to say, I know Christine's going to respond to this and react to this. I know 100%. Several conditions, and the reason I was mentioning about misconception as well, several conditions and behaviours can be mistaken for narcissism, including borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, autism spectrum disorder, substance use disorder, and the aftermath of traumatic experiences like PTSD. So the question I've got, and this is for Richard as well, do you believe there's narcissistic behaviour, even just a little bit, in all of us?
Yep.
Who's that for?
I was wanting to hear from Richard because he's not a sport yet.
Well, I think that anybody that has done anything great in this world has a little bit of narcissism in them.
Exactly.
But now also in recovery, a lot of people get narcissistic in recovery because they say you got to put your recovery first before anything or everybody else. And a lot of people have a lot of narcissistic traits after they get into recovery. So
Yeah.
my question is, because I used to be that narcissistic guy, but once I got sober, I tried not to do those things anymore. So can a narcissist actually change?
I honestly believe yes. And the reason I'm saying yes, a narcissism can change, and I'm going to say one word here: accountability. Accountability, because when do you actually see a narcissism take responsibility for their own actions?
Say that again. Hang on, Stuart. Say that last part again, Adam, because you just hit on something.
Yeah, a narcissistic person, and this is the big question here, and this is for everybody here, when do you hear a narcissistic person take accountability for their own actions?
It's interesting because I mean, to first thing out there, Adam, I'm over to you, plus Christine. I think, or Richard, when you're an alcoholic and you announce it, and you go to sort of AA or something. Part of that is you may not drink ever again, but you're always an alcoholic. Because if you just have one drink, you'll go back. So it's kind of that thing there where you can never drink again because just one drink will have those those devastating effects. So, but as I understand it, if you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic, and you never drink again.
Yeah.
I guess, is it a similar thing with a narcissist that if they have that accountability and awareness that
the big problem with narcissists is that they won't go with accountability. That's one of the biggest problems. They take no responsibility for their actions.
By the very definition Stuart just read to us, they do not have that ability to be accountable. They have lack of empathy. That was one of the definitions. Lack of empathy. There is no possible way. First of all, they're not even going to seek help. Even if they maybe recognize that, maybe something's going on here. As Richard, okay, now Richard's bringing in two different worlds, okay, the world of mental disorders and addiction. And yes, that's a whole nother discussion. But because of what he experienced with the addiction first to alcohol, okay, that's where those narcissistic traits and tendencies came in. Now, you asked Adam, your first question was, are we all narcissistic in our lives? And Dr. Stewart actually shook his head, and I'm over here going, yes, we all have those narcissistic tendencies, without a doubt. Richard recognized those early enough in his recovery to say, whoa, wait a second. I don't want to be this human. I don't want to be this way. I don't want to act this way to my wife, my bride, my family, my children, my coworkers. He took that response. There's your accountability, okay? A true narcissist cannot look in the mirror and say, that's the problem. They don't see that.
No, they don't.
They do not see. They are not the problem. Everyone and everything else is the problem. It's never them. So therefore, if it's not them, how can they take responsibility and accountability for something that, hey, that's not my problem? Dr. Stewart also said in the beginning, he said that workplace narcissism and abuse and toxic relationships in the workplace, the narcissist in that situation, when you say, hey, I'm not, here's my boundary, I think you just crossed it, in that workplace relationship, you need to apologize. That narcissist is going to apologize like this. I'm sorry you took it that way. I'm sorry you feel that way. They never accept that accountability. When I was in that relationship, nothing was ever, I'm sorry I did that to you. It was always, I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry you made me do that. I'm sorry this happened to you. But it was not a true apology.
Or sarcasm. Sorry.
Yeah.
I had a friend
But
who
it
had
is though, it
they
is.
would say
It
sorry,
is.
you're always sarcastic, and you'd say you never, you never. That's not genuine. You could tell.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
always
it's
had
like,
sarcasm. It's like never.
right. I mean, like when he shot me in the back of
Are you froze again?
when he shot me in the back of the head, his next comment was, "Look at what you made me do."
Wow.
Okay, I can't tell you how many times it was, well, I don't remember it happening, so it didn't happen. Well, just because you don't remember it doesn't mean it didn't happen. The truth of the matter is it happened. And there's no way for them to, and like I said, when I started out, you'd be hard pressed to get a true narcissist, according to what he just read in the 5th edition, that to say, okay, you know what, I'm a narcissist, help me. It just doesn't happen, because they're not in their eyes, they are not the problem. They're not.
I mean, the interesting thing is if you listen to the people who spend a lot of time counseling them, and I cite, you've probably heard of Dr. Ramani Devasula.
I love her. Yes.
Yeah. And when you talk, when you hear her accounts of dealing with narcissists, it's very interesting that some narcissists actually, for whatever reason, seem to have that ability to acknowledge that there's something wrong and they want to do something about it. The problem is that in order to see that through to completion, it takes effort, it takes time, it takes a lot of discomfort, and it takes self-analysis. None of those are strong points for narcissists. So even with the help of a therapist, they'll only get so far, and then very often they drop out, because it's a lot easier to go back to what they're familiar with and what they know than it is to continue. I mean, there are people, I guess the therapists would argue that there are very, very few, but there are some narcissists that move from being absolutely toxic to being able to manage their behavior in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, if you're looking at a line that's that long, the narcissist starts here, they move to there, but there's still all that distance there that they could move to, but they don't. And very often they get so far, and then it's like an elastic band, it pulls them back. They're back to the beginning and just continue with the behaviors. Yeah. So if you ask, I know people like Dr. Ramani will say that, one of her defining comments really is narcissists do not change. And one of the problems for the victim, or the people who are on the receiving end of that, is the narcissist traps those people in that hope that the narcissist will change. So in the psychological manipulation that the narcissist does, they sort of drop them little nuggets which show evidence of, perhaps things are changing. And it's actually that hope that then actually keeps that victim tied into that relationship. Yeah. And the narcissist knows all the time that there's going to be no change. Nothing's going to happen. All they want is power and control and adulation, and anything they will do to get that, even if that means lying through their back teeth, even if it means deceiving people, even if it means, denying things that have happened in front of your eyes, they will do that, because for them, reality is what's needed at that moment in time to meet their own needs. So and a really interesting story, I will shut up eventually, honestly, but a really interesting story I heard on this was a friend of mine who was a counsellor went round to a friend she thought her husband was narcissistic, but wanted a second opinion. So she invited my friend round, who she knew was quite perceptive in these things. And the husband was actually there, and he came downstairs. He said, I'm just going to make drinks. Would you like one? So he was charming and very pleasant because the guest was there. and he went into the kitchen. She saw him, they watched him get the mugs out, and then he got 3 tea bags and sort of put 1 tea bag in each mug, and he poured the boiling water in, and he gave the cup to his wife and said, "Here we are, here's your tea." Gave the cup to a friend who was visiting and said, "Here's your tea," and he said, "And now I'm going to enjoy my coffee." And his wife said, "But you've just put tea bags in. We've watched you." No, you didn't. Obviously, I put a coffee bag in mine, even though he'd taken it out of a tea bag box. And he was hell bent on persuading her that she had seen something that hadn't happened, or vice versa, that he'd done. She was accusing him basically of doing something that wasn't true, even though the evidence was there in front of them that what he had done, it was, there was no need for him to lie. He could have just said, "Well, I'll take my drink upstairs." But what they will do is they will provoke a response that then emotionally touches us. We respond, and the narcissist gets a real kick out of that, because they've got either attention, they've got some form of justification, they've got some feeling of control, they've been able to manipulate whatever it is that they need at that moment in time. They've been able to achieve through emotional engagement by the opposition. And what a lot of people say is, in that situation, don't raise the question. He wants to think it's coffee, let him think it's coffee for the sake of the argument. Don't engage, because then he gets absolutely no input from that conversation, is more likely to lose interest and buzz off and find something else to do, rather than being engaged and feeling empowered.
And that right there is exactly what the victim on the receiving end of that goes through 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Can you even imagine what that's like to live with that? It is hell on earth, without a doubt, because you are constantly questioning yourself then. Did I really see this? Wait a minute, I think I see this. I'm pretty sure I saw him when the coffee's really close to, maybe I didn't see it. Maybe I'm only thinking. I mean, that is what we live with on a daily, all day long basis in every form possible.
Right.
Yeah.
My next question.
Narcissist.
My next question to you all is, it's going to be a good one, this. What or who creates a narcissism or narcissistic individual? What or who?
Nobody.
I'll let thank you. I was going to say, I'll let Stuart answer that one.
There are the two main competitors are nature, in other words, the environment that we're brought up in, which we all know influences, how we are. So as children look for love, they look for affection, they look for
Acceptance and stuff like that, yeah.
Just feeling validated, feeling important, and that comes from the primary caregiver, parent, whatever. And so if that's deprived, the child is deprived, and therefore you would think, oh, well, anybody who grows up with narcissistic parents will grow up to be a narcissist, because that's what they've learned. And the interesting thing is that some do. Some of those children who come from narcissistic parents grow up into being perfectly normal, balanced people with empathy and who understand boundaries. And then some actually grow up to become empaths or empathetic, where they spend their whole life, not empathetic, but an actual empath, where they actually they feel almost toxically committed to having to please people.
Yeah.
And so just because people grow up in a narcissistic home doesn't mean that they're narcissistic, but they can be. Equally, people who grow up in a healthy home, balanced home, receive the love and attention, for whatever reason, you can get narcissists growing out of that family. You can get normal people, and again, you can get those who are higher in empathy. The interesting group is that there are children who get everything they want without challenge, if you like, the spoiled, as we say in Britain, without filters, the spoiled brats. And they basically go through life getting what they want, when they want, how they want, and they're never challenged. And so they have no resilience. They have no concept of being able to challenge a challenge to their ideas, and therefore they sort of this entitlement of, well, I deserve this. If that's challenged, that then just brings out a whole load of emotions that they've not learned to regulate because they've never been challenged. And it's interesting how many narcissistic children, there have been research where they've suggested the majority of narcissistic children don't come from damaged families, they come from privileged families, and they've always had their own way. So
obviously, Kerry is in the comments, obviously my bride, and she's been putting a few comments, and I thank you for this, I really do. She put originally, she grew up with a narcissistic mother. 6 months of therapy, I've healed enough to have a new relationship with her, and it's a better one because of her therapy. So my question to that, and obviously the question to Kerry as well, is it the therapy that's made it better? Or is it the inner self? Like the inner confidence and surrounding yourself with people who value you? To bring the best out,
both. You know, if you're in the problem of, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, you're in a dysfunctional relationship, and your sense of reality is totally distorted to the point that you become to rely on the narcissist for your reality, which is a nonsense, but that's the way they work. If you've got people who are expecting a normal relationship, which is what we go into. We don't go into a relationship thinking, oh, well, I'll look for someone who'll abuse me. We go into a relationship expecting two-way input, mutual respect, to work with each other, that both people benefit from that relationship.
And that's what the response is.
So you go in with this sense of mutuality within that relationship. The problem with narcissists is they don't go in with any concept of mutuality. So on one side, you've got the victim expecting a nice mutual relationship. On the other side, you've got the narcissist who's simply expecting to get what they want. And therefore, unless something changes in that relationship, it's going to continue. So either the victim leaves, disappears completely, cuts off all contact with the narcissist, and heals. So they go through therapy, they develop new friendships, and through that they begin to readjust their head and their perception of reality. Or if they decide to stay in a relationship with that narcissist, what happens is that relationship becomes possible because the victim changes their expectations from the relationship. So whereas previously you might expect love, you might expect affirmation, you might expect encouragement, gifts, whatever, you readjust your baseline to a baseline of reality, which is, in reality, if you're looking for anything emotional, you won't get it from the narcissistic relationship in any positive manner. And therefore, by looking outside to, trusted friends, people who've been through the same experiences, therapy and help, you basically readjust your baseline to a sense of reality, so that when you go back in to that relationship, which you've decided not to break, you are more able to identify their tactics, to handle those tactics, but also you learn. I think one of the really powerful things with a therapy, and it's with narcissists, it is trauma. There is PTSD involved. It's a complex PTSD, so it's a long-term PTSD. But there are elements within that where you learn how to control your response and actually pull out of emotional engagement, because that's what the narcissist thrives on. They're looking for buttons to press to get a reaction in you, either happy, sad, emotional, some kind of emotional response, because that lets them know that they still have control. And
Yeah.
what therapy helps people to do is interact with the narcissist in a way that they can tolerate, but they've also learned to set boundaries for themselves of what they won't accept, and they will speak up and say, you know, I'm not accepting that.
Yeah.
And they have a sort of foundation on which they stand, which the narcissist, when they see that someone is solid and someone is not going to give way, they become less interested in them because they're going to be hard work.
Okay.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, the
Yeah.
therapy actually adjusts that baseline to a new reality, which means that a relationship of some kind is possible, but it's never going to be a totally functioning, healthy relationship. It's always going to be dysfunctional. It's that the perception of the victim is changed to the extent that they're not expecting things that they can't have. So it moves into the realm of reality rather than continually expecting fantasy.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions, and obviously this is to all of you as well. Now, I want feedback from each of you. Obviously, she just put that she people pleases, and she still does it sometimes. But the question is, now, obviously, I've been with her 16 and a half years now. 16 and a half years, which is basically a very long time. So with her, and she's never had a relationship with her mum. Never. So would you say currently, like, there's no abuse going on or anything like that? Question one, is her mum analysing her so she can strike at the right moment? Or the second one is, does Kerry need to be careful about the potential outcome? Or is she okay?
Can I? So,
Yeah.
because she still has a relationship with her mom, or is at least reestablishing that relationship with her mom. Okay. And if her mom is classified as a true narcissist, according to what Dr. Storr told us and what we know living with it, okay, that possibility is certainly there, Adam, for mom to strike, you know, at some point, without a doubt. As Stuart just told us, they don't change. Okay. And even if they go through therapy, that little bit of line of where they do heal some, that bigger line is still way out there. Okay. Unfortunately, that is something that us as victims of that have to deal with for the rest of our lives, no matter how much therapy we go through. Every relationship will be judged based on what we went through. We will question everything. Clearly, because you're already questioning it. It's if she's, meaning your wife, your bride, if she's adamant about one, having some sort of relationship with her mom and keeping that boundary and keeping things at this, that's something that she'll have to work on. It will be within Kerry to say, okay, I have to be on high alert with mom because I don't know what's going to happen. And we just don't know where mom's going to go with this. But to continue, I would strongly suggest that she continue the therapy, continue learning, continue growing, continue reading, you know, on what we need. I do. And that, you know, it was back in when I left mine, it was in 2018. The divorce was finalized in 2020. Here I am 5 years later, and I'm still dealing with his shit. Now, not near as bad as it was in the beginning, but yes, going into new relationships, that trust issue is there. You know, is this guy going to hurt me? Is this guy going to be a narcissist? Am I looking too hard for red flags? I mean, it's something that we always will deal with because we've lived with that that, as Stuart said, the vision that I get when he was talking about, the roller coaster ride that we live with, it's not a roller coaster. Okay. At the amusement park, there's that ride where you go up, really, really slow. And then you get to the top and you got that moment. And then all of a sudden it drops. Okay. That's what life is living like. Living with a narcissist. You got, everything's going great. When I talk about it, it's like a bell. Okay. So you know how a bell kind of, it looks like this, and then you go up and you got the top. Okay. Well, in the beginning of that relationship, you have that you don't really see all the red flags. Okay. Oh, maybe he had a bad day, because it's that narcissism, those traits start to come out little by little. Okay. Could be everything from he got angry and slapped the glass off the table. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, remember, there are different forms of narcissism. Mine happened to be an extremely physically abusive one as well. But there are different forms. But it's like that little curve, it starts out slow in the relationship. And you really don't know. You get those little moments of, that he gets angry at you. It's, for putting the toilet paper roll on the wrong way. Okay. I didn't pick up the phone on the first freaking ring. That was a huge one for him. That control over my life and what I do. I lost my family because little by little he took that away. So it's like that bell curve, okay? Little by little, these things start to happen. And before you realize you're on that upswing of that really bad high, okay, like with alcohol or drugs, you're hooked. You are in that relationship, you're hooked, and you are on that high. And then referencing again the carnival ride, the amusement park ride, the next thing you know, you're dropped. And where do you start again? You're confused by that drop. You've lost everything. You've, not just mentally, but physically drained of trying to live with all these ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. I mean, like a really big roller coaster. It's hard to, when you get to that point, you're already in that relationship. And one of the things Stuart pointed to was, if it's a verbally, psychologically manipulative, non-abusive, and I want to stress non-abusive narcissist, yes, there are boundaries. The biggest thing that Stuart said, don't give them control. Take that away. Take your control back. It's hard when it's a physically abusive person, because they will fight back.
Yeah, what do you think, Richard?
Well, my mother is the narcissist, and now I realize I have the option to either take the abuse or get up and say, okay, I'll see you next week, and I take the power back. And I think we have to be able to realize that it is what it is. The person's not going to change, but we don't allow them to have power over us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Nick?
Yes, it's interesting. I mean, I like I said earlier, I knew a guy who, when I worked in an investment bank, and he, we used to think he had very much sociopath qualities, but definitely had a lot of these qualities of a narcissist. And I think I read a book called The Modern Day, slightly different, The Modern Day Psychopath, and it was basically by someone who worked in the banking industry, and it was saying how, a lot of people who work as traders could be said to have, psychopathic qualities. Not every psychopath chops up people and serial killers, but that ruthlessness, that selfishness, that drive, the way they get satisfaction, motivation. And it was saying how, certain things like trading, high pressure jobs like trading, require people with almost psychopathic qualities to thrive in that environment. And the person I knew, was definitely had a lot of these qualities of a narcissist and also a sociopath, but that made him very successful work. And I guess this is the thing, really, isn't it? Is you know, do these people change fundamentally? Are they you know, are they? I think definitely these, you know, you fundamentally, which reflects your personality type, a lot of these kind of things.
Yeah.
And it's, I suppose it's you know, I think going back to like the Kerry thing, of course, you know, I think we have to protect ourselves, you know, if you know, we have to always take err on the side of you know, of being cautious when we meet people who we know have certain qualities or have certain qualities in the past, because, you know, we are vulnerable to these sort of people. You know, they are quite controlling. They have, you know, they're quite hard to deal with. I think it's a protective thing. We always have to be a bit careful, but
Yeah.
It's
It is tough. It is tough. Yeah. Well, obviously, I may as well bring it up. Next week, obviously, speaking of abuse, I know I was abusive at one point to a lot of people in my life. I mean, a lot of people. And I'll be discussing some of that next week when I actually share. Obviously, there's going to be a panel of us. I know Richard's going to be on it. I know Nick's going to be on it. I know Ashley's back. When I discussed my addiction story. That's next week. So yeah, life as an addict.
Just coming back to your question, Adam, or the question about being narcissists are always looking for someone's weaknesses, and they whenever you first meet a narcissist, whether that's because you're their child or whether it's a romantic relationship, the narcissist spends a lot of time analyzing you for your strengths and weaknesses, and so those sorts of things are always there, even if you've changed, the narcissist hasn't. And I think the danger is that we sometimes think, oh well, I've changed, I feel different, and therefore the situation must be different. And actually it's not.
No,
changed, and the situation feels different because you see it in a different way. The narcissists themselves haven't changed at all, and so the danger is, I guess, for Kerry, that there is always that chance that if she opens the door, then her mother will go straight through that, and will start that familiar pattern, which is entrenched and part of her psyche and part of her behavior anyway.
The analyzing,
where if Kerry hasn't got the wherewithal in terms of defences or is caught off guard, it's very easy then for that abusive relationship to start again. But one thing I heard today that was really interesting was that if you are dealing with someone in your life who is narcissistic, it's always helpful to have either a mental list or a physical list somewhere of how they operate. So what is it that triggers the narcissist into responding? What is it they want to hear from you? What is it that makes them feel better or appeases them? And once you kind of do that reverse psychology on the narcissist and understand what they want to hear, in some ways you can keep the relationship from being dragged into the narcissistic direction by simply responding in the way that they want to hear. So, if a mum thinks it's important that she always likes her daughter to appreciate what she's done, then it's for Kerry to be able to just feed that into the conversation, that sense of appreciation, the mother, the narcissist, is getting out of that relationship something of what she's looking for, and so the chances of it getting more out of control are actually suppressed. So it's sometimes, especially if you're dealing with people and continue to have to deal with them, then understanding how they operate, what you can say that will appease them, what definitely not to say that will trigger them, but also, as Richard said, he said, he's now in a position where he feels he's got the power that he will say, I'm sorry, I'm not taking that anymore, or I'll see you next week, and actually gets up and takes the power over that, takes the power away from the narcissist. So with a relationship, as long as you feel that you're in control and you are able to moderate how the narcissist reacts, that's fine. But then if the narcissist just goes off on one and reacts, it's then about having those boundaries in place that you've made it very clear. If it gets unholy, if it gets uncivil, if you get rude, whatever it is that, it manifests itself in the narcissist, I will leave. You set the boundaries, you set your intentions, and then as soon as the narcissist demonstrates any of those things, you must stand by those boundaries, but you do what you said. And that way, it's a very strong message to the narcissist that you are no longer under their control or not prepared to be under their control. And it's up to them to deal with that as they want. How they deal with it is not your problem. How Kerry deals with it is her problem. And to feel secure and confident in that is the most important thing. And I think understanding what it is that she can, how she can counteract, what to avoid, etc., will help with it.
Absolutely. Any final words, guys, before we wrap up?
I just want to. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Stewart for everything he contributed.
Yeah.
And I just want to reiterate what he said in the beginning about a narcissist being consistent, that it's not a one and done. It's continual over and over and over and over. And if you find yourself in that situation, get out.
Yeah.
As soon as possible. I mean, that's free and safety, because that possibility, that narcissist turning physical, is there without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's to put the scale of narcissism or that sort of toxic impact of a narcissist into perception, into perspective. One of the work that has been done is that they've looked at the psychological profile of the mass shooters, so the people who go on these shooting sprees in schools. And it's interesting that when you look at the psychological profile of those people, it's very similar, if not identical, to that of those of a covert narcissist. So it's not that every narcissist is going to become a shooter, a murderer, whatever, but narcissism isn't just an inconvenience. It actually does have really, really serious impacts.
Yeah.
And implications for the victim if they're not careful.
Just say fascinating. Listening to you talk, Stuart, really learning a lot. So appreciate, you're coming on sharing that. Just my final thoughts. I mean, I guess is we have to. We have to prioritize our own mental health and do what is right for us. And with all these situations, it's not about whether someone has a label or we don't have a label, what label they have. Do we have a healthy relationship with the person? Are they treating us in a way that we expect to be treated, want to be treated? And I think, that is all that matters. And I think that. I had, like I said, this friend who was, with sociopathic qualities, and I decided to stay friends with him, but I could have cut him out. I could have moved off. That's my decision. But I think we must have basically have to prioritize our own mental health, what works for us, and set our boundaries for relationships.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, thank you all for coming on. Thank you, Kerry, for participating. I hope everyone's done that. Please subscribe, everyone. Please subscribe and share this. I know once this is downloaded after it, there's going to be a lot of clips going out to YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels that are going to be all out there. It's even going on Twitter as well. So keep an eye out for that. I'm going to be doing that over the next couple of days. But yeah, we'll see you next week. And yeah, hope nobody gets
Thank you.
tricked.
It's been lovely to meet you, Christine and Nick, for the first time.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes, you too, Stuart.
And Adam, of
Absolutely.
course.
Absolutely.
And Adam.
See, everyone forgets me.
Well, I know. You see, it's just that.
So quiet.
Just worry about it, Adam. I would. You know.
Yeah.
Having
Christine
talked
reminds
about
me of that.
narcissists-
Christine
Yeah.
reminds me of that. Okay. Bye.
All right.